Mambo? You're muted, Esther. Kogei, uko hapo?
Niko hapa.
Na Ruth.
Hi Elvis, naona watu wameng'ara na video. Please allow me to have my video on, but I hope I'm audible enough.
You're audible, but people would want to see you.
Hiyo picha si imesuffice ama?
Wanasema haisuffice.
Hakuna picha.
Thomas, jambo.
Jambo Elvis.
I think we're waiting for Habiba, who else? Wilson and Wakoko to join us, and then we can be able to start. So let me just get in touch with them to know how far they are.
Yeah, a lot.
So we'll start in 10 minutes time, just waiting for the ED to join in. And of course, one of the partners from Uraia, then we'll be able to start. Well, good afternoon, my guests today. We want to start this session, a session where we are going to discuss about the state of the nation. And this session is being brought to you courtesy of CMD Kenya, which is Center for Multi-Party Democracy, supported by Uraia Trust and the Royal Danish Embassy. Before we go deep into the topics of discussions, we just want to also let you know that we have a representatives from one of the partners, which is Uraia Trust, Mr. John Kamande, who is with us in this call. And I would therefore want to give him a chance to make his opening remarks before we proceed to the other parts of this conversation. So Mr. John Kamande, if you are there and you can hear me, kindly unmute and go ahead to give the opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Elvis. Please confirm whether you can hear me.
Can hear you very well and I can see you clearly.
Oh, okay. Glad to see you too, and the rest of the panelists who are going to share with us more about the state of the nation in this very timely conversation. As Elvis has just introduced me, my name is John Kamande. I work at Uraia Trust as the Civic Education Officer, and we work very closely with our partners, including CMD, who are organizing this. And we are very happy that we saw it fit to have this conversation when it's still hot, because we can all agree that the country is not as peaceful as we expect it to be. And we are seeing the opposition and the current government, of course, differing very, very strongly and taking very hard lines with regard to issues to do with how our nation is run. And briefly, probably what I can just say is that it's important for all of us to remember that we have a constitution that lays down the processes and procedures for all this. And it's very clear. I'm not even trying to pick sides, but voice of dissent in any government and in any democracy is a healthy thing. So when we are seeing government trying to repress voices, and particularly I'm not even only referring to the opposition, but a considerable amount of Kenyans and a significant population of this country is not satisfied with the way things are being run. So I hope we're going to be objective. One thing that I've been challenged whenever we have this conversation is to ignore the issue of binaries. If I say this thing, I do not politically subscribe to either as me or Kenya Kwanza, but I'm trying to be objective. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to a very fruitful discussion, and I know majority of us here are young people, including myself. Very glad that we are taking lead in shaping this discussion. I'm sure, Elvis, after this, we are planning to voice our issues and what you're going to decide or agree in this meeting, so that we can also take part in the conversation of trying to rebuild our country. So thank you very much for inviting us, and we are really, really happy to follow and to be able to work together to see that we are producing, and we are also vocal in terms of trying to salvage our country, because we can all agree we are at a situation which is called, I think, negative peace. Yeah, it's satisfaction that is high level. I really am concerned that for the past 3 days, we are not seeing any light to whether we're going to resolve some of these issues. So thank you very much on behalf of Uraia Trust. We want to appreciate the efforts and the conversation that are going on, and this timely intervention is really key. And kudos to CMD for always embracing dialogue and supporting it towards seeing our country moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for those introductory remarks that you've given unto us. And we really thank Uraia Trust for always being there and for always supporting such causes, opening up the spaces for dialogue and opening up the spaces for interactions that are supposed to shape the future of this country now and even beyond. And we are really grateful that you found time to also be part of this conversation and to listen into what these excellent panelists are going to discuss in this conversation throughout. The state of the nation, as we all know, can be discussed in a very broader perspective. There's a lot that we can talk about. But for this purpose of this call today, we are going to broadly look at 4 areas, specifically the anti-government demonstrations that we've seen in the recent past, as well as the insecurity in some parts of the country. Secondly, we are also going to look at the supremacy battles in Parliament and whether Parliament has really stood ground in its position as an independent arm of the government. We're also going to discuss something around the rule of law and especially the disregard of some court rulings that we've been seeing in the recent past in this country and what implication this has then on our sustainability. And lastly, we are also going to look at something around political succession and sustainability, the whole discussion around how do we strengthen our political parties to ensure that they are then sustainable beyond elections. We've seen so much happening after elections, many people shifting allegiances from the parties that sponsor them into parliament. And then what does this mean to these political parties that are left aside? So this is what is going to shape this conversation. I'll be your moderator, Elvis Wambura. I have a team of panelists that I'm going to introduce, starting with Esther Nyonje, who is a political analyst. We have Kiptonui Kogei, who is a political scientist, as well as the program officer at KYPA. KYPA is Kenya Young Parliamentarians Association. We have Ms. Ruth Bolo, who is a democracy and governance analyst. We have Makore Wilson, who is a political scientist, who is with us as well. We have Habiba Abdi, who is the Vice President of Technical University of Kenya, also the Deputy Secretary General of UDM Youth League. And we have Mr. Wafula Akoko, who will be joining us as we proceed, who is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. So these are the interesting panelists that we have, and I'm glad that we have also been joined with other participants in the call, whom will be giving a chance to respond to some of the issues as we go by. But now, straight into the discussion, and to start us off, I'll go to the panelists and ask this very first question. Of course, as they introduce themselves, they can give us the introductory remarks and just let us know, 1 year, almost a year later, after we had the elections of August 9th, 2022, do you think the country is moving in the right direction? And therefore, I'll start with Esther Nyonje. Just as an introductory remark, introduce yourself and of course, give us your very initial thoughts in that subject area.
Hi, panelists. Thank you for hosting me to this conversation today. I am Esther Nyonje. I'm a political scientist, political analyst, and I also host a show on YouTube. It's called Kenya Explained, that tries to analyze these matters. I do interviews, roundtable discussions, and analysis, self-analysis. Your question, if the country is moving to the right direction, if we continue the way we are doing right now, the way in this mode that we are right now, we are not moving in the right direction. That is the straight answer. I'm afraid to say that we are slowly moving into an anarchical state, a state of lawlessness. And it is very easy for at this time for a country to be considered as a failed state. I mean, look at what is happening. There's so much double standards with our constitution. We look like we are in a constitutional crisis that has been caused by maybe political crisis. And there's so many underlying factors that have been kept under the carpet that you can't explain, that you can't bring out one particular reason to say that this is the reason that is causing this. What do I mean? That even as people are protesting about the economic standards of living that are high, there are so many things that are politically geared towards that, so many factors that are politically motivated that have been kept under the carpet. So when we're talking about economic issues, it's not even about economic issues alone. There are political issues, socio-economic issues, ethical issues in our politics. So there is so much that makes anyone feel like we are not moving into the right direction as a country. Our democracy is getting weaker. And the question left is, what is left for the generations after this generation? What is left for the children and the grandchildren of this country?
Thank you, Esther, for that introductory remark. And now I'll bring in Kogei to also help us unpack this. Do you agree with the sentiments that our democracy is getting weaker?
Thank you very much, Elvis, and my co-panelists. My name is Kiptanui Kogei, a political scientist who's an expert in public policy and governance. I also work at Kenya Young Parliamentarians Association as a programs officer. Just as a quick rejoinder, Elvis, is that indeed our democracy is at test. I won't say it is weakening, but it is at test. This is occasioned by the fact that we have elections, we finish elections, but then we have to have political settlements to issues. I tend to come from a school of thought that elections settle political issues. And it beats logic if we can have elections and then we look for other political means to settle political issues. Economically and politically, we are at a bad state. But socially, I think the Kenyan state is growing socially. There are things that people would agitate for from all walks of life, and you would not see issues to do with tribalism, issues to do with these vices that have plagued the Kenyan society for quite a while. But now economically and politically is where we have a problem.
Well, thank you for that, Koge, and bringing in that perspective that economically and politically we have a problem, but socially we are growing. Ruth Bolo, do you agree with that?
Thank you so much, Elvis, for hosting us and for having this conversation with us. My name is Ruth Bolo, as you rightfully said. I am a governance and democratic analyst. I've been in the governance space for about 6 years in different capacities. So this is a conversation I enjoy. Now, when Koge spoke about us being progressive socially, I was laughing because we are losing our sense of community, which ideally is what brings out our social aspect. Dating back to maybe 20, 30 years ago, if my child would have done a mistake or would have been going through something, or a relative of mine back in the village would be going through something, the community would take that up as a community problem. But right now, even to do a community fundraiser that is successful, it takes you to put together heaven and earth. It's very difficult. And like maybe 5, 10 years ago, when the community would come together and say, we need to rally together behind Ruth and ensure that she's able to afford that fee. But right now, things are so bad that it is affecting our social capacity as a country. You find that because I only have 100 shillings, and I don't know whether tomorrow I will have another 100 shillings, I am not going to remove 50 shillings for Esther to go to school. I'm not going to remove a slice of bread for Elvis to also have a meal because I don't know about tomorrow. So I feel like these issues are definitely affecting our social lives. Of course, even looking back, areas that would be used for children to have playing fields are now being used for construction. Areas that were social centers are now being used for, housing and things like that. So I really think that the economic and the political issues that we are having are streaming in and affecting our social lives. As to whether or not Kenya is headed towards the correct direction, I think it was Esther who spoke about our democracy being weakened, and I agree with her 100%. However, I'd like us to stop looking at it as just a national, sort of like at the national level. I want us to look at it at an individual level. When was the last time you went to a public participation forum as a Kenyan citizen? When was the last time you put your member of parliament or member of county assembly to task and told them, well, I remember in your manifesto you spoke about this, but I've never seen you talking in Bunge. I've never seen you saying anything in county assembly. So I think we also need to date back to that and really look at some of the elected leaders we have who have already started shifting. What does that say? Say that there's no political ideology that they were aligned to. And really, it was just for them to get this ticket. So I think that's a conversation that we need to have beyond just our elected leaders and also come to us as electors.
Thank you, Ruth, for that. And Habiba, are you satisfied as vice president of an institution? Do you feel that the university students are satisfied, or from your own personal perspective, do you feel that you're satisfied with the way things are at the moment in the country, 1 year, almost a year later after we had our elections in August last year? Habiba? Looks like Habiba is having a problem, so I'd like Makore to come in at this level and also contribute to this. Makore, if you had my question.
Thank you very much, Elvis, for having us for this very timely session discussing about important matters of the nation. So my name is Makore Wilson. I'm a research policy and a political consultant, though you have termed me a political scientist. So I'll go straight. I'll respond to the questions you had asked before on whether, as a country, we are moving towards the right direction. I can say that clearly we are not on the right track. Because as far as I agree with some philosophers, like when I talk about David Easton, who defines politics, as who gets what and the how, and when I will also look at Robert Dahl, who talks about politics as authoritative allocation of resources. So we are in a situation whereby we are constrained in terms of the resources that we have as a country, looking at the debt that we have, the external debt, and also the internal debt, or domestic debt. We have had the leadership talk a number of times that we don't have the funds to be able to fund a number of activities in the country. So these are some of the things that have also brought about demonstrations. So when you look at the response that the government is giving to the demonstrators and what also the opposition is doing, it means we are creating a situation that is automatically going to destroy our country in the near future if we don't come up with the better ways of responding to the issues that are of great concern to the social life, the economic and political life of the citizens of this country. So, you know, basically, we are supposed to have a link between how we take our social life, the political and economic life. But in our country, we have let politics control everything. You find that all the decisions that we make about our social life and economic life are guided by politics. And that is where we have a problem. Because you find that many people who are in the political space are pushing for their own interests, the interest that do not represent the views of the people. This one takes me back to where you talk about ongoing anti-government demonstrations. Maybe I can give my take on the same. You know, when you look at Article 37 of the Constitution of Kenya, which gives the citizens of the Republic of Kenya the right to demonstration, to picket. But remember, the same Article 37 talks about unarmed and peaceful demonstrations. Then it brings the question. When I was watching the demonstration in the country recently, I was seeing the police officers using live bullets, firing live bullets at citizens, and I was also using demonstrators using stones to stone the police officers. That means that one aspect, when we look at when we complain that the police are using force, then we ask ourselves, were we peaceful? Despite that we have the right to assembly, were we peaceful? And then the police officers are also using the force. Were they justified? So those are things that we also need to look at. So we need to sit together. This is the executive, also the leadership of the country, and also the opposition to be able to agree on a better ways of putting Article 37 into better use in this country. You also talked, the last question I think you're talking about, you're asking a BIPA whether students, I don't know if I can respond to that. You're talking about students, whether they're satisfied how things are running in the country. In my own view, is that they're not satisfied, they're not comfortable, because one thing is when you have some political turbulence in the country which affect people negatively. Like now, I remember the other day we had a notice being issued by the Ministry of Interior and also the Ministry of Education, giving a notice that people should not go to school. There is example various places in the country. Automatically, so the aspect of delaying the syllabus and also interfering with the studies in the country. So we cannot say that students are happy or anybody who is involved in the academic endeavor will be happy with what's happening in the country at the moment, because a number of things have been interfered with, which, you know, when time is gone, we cannot recover. That is one thing that we can always remind ourselves. So time wasted can never be recovered. So we'll continue engaging as we move on. That is my take as regards to the first three questions that we had asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Makore, for bringing out the different perspective, and of course, jumping into our next point of discussion, which would be the anti-government demonstrations. But even before we go there, I'd just like to ask Habiba now, I hope she can hear us. How are students coping in this period? Are there things that have changed from the past, and how are they managing? Habiba, if you could unmute kindly.
Thank you, Elvis. My apologies for the disruption in the network. I also like to thank my co-panelists for being here as well. So how are students managing? It is quite tough. Let's just be honest on that part. The anti-government demonstrations are really, it is disruptive to the academic calendar. And for us specifically as the Technical University of Kenya, you find that our location is like, it's literally at the center, it's in the CBD. So you find that a lot of students are fearing to come to class. A lot of students are not very comfortable coming from any part of Nairobi to attend classes. And this is really causing us to lose out on a lot. If we think about like now, how are we coping with it? We find some lecturers are really trying to now, during these demonstration periods, to try and hold their classes online. But it's also hectic for us as a technical institution because most of our classes are expected to be online because our curriculum is more hands-on than theory. So it becomes very challenging for us to get around this situation, Yamandamano. It is really affecting us as comrades. Yeah. Also, you find that even not only from an academic perspective, a lot of our comrades are paying school fees for themselves. So you find that this comrade is now unable to get even today's lunch or today's supper because of Mandamano. So it is really affecting students at this point, and our comrades are not happy at all with the Mandamano situation.
Thank you, Habiba, for that introductory remark. And I think we have already moved into the next topic of discussion, which is the anti-government demonstrations. A lot of questions have been asked on the legality and the constitutionality of these demonstrations and whether the organizers of these demonstrations have lived up to the expectations of Article 37, as our brother Makore had started to allude. And of course, also questions have arisen about whether the government is using too much force against the people who are demonstrating and claiming to be doing it within the law. So Esther, do you think these demonstrations as they are, could they be constitutional, or there's something wrong somewhere? Is there a missing link? Because we've seen running battles between the demonstrators and the police officers, which is not supposed to be the case, as was envisaged by Article 37 of the Constitution. Where's the missing link?
I would start by saying that let's not demonize demonstrations. Demonstrations are not as bad as our country wants to make it look at. I can give you a case example in Myanmar. It's a country in Asia. In August, September, and October in 2007, they held demonstrations. They were not peaceful though. They had demonstrations because of high fuel prices that were caused because of removal of subsidies. And that brought government attention and forced the government to respond to them. And in turn, the price of fuel was forced to come down. So that's a positive effect of demonstrations. And demonstrations can also help create public awareness to the public and help the public be aware of what's really happening. So demonstrations are not that bad, though the ripple effects of demonstrations in most settings are more negative than positive. Case in point, our country, Kenya, we've never had peaceful demonstrations. Article 37 that everyone mentions right now, it is operationalized by the Public Order Act. The Public Order Act falls under the Bill of Rights, and that means that it has limitations. So when we are going out to demonstrate, are we looking at the public safety? Is it infringing the rights of other people? Is it infringing the freedoms of other people? Is national security interfered? Someone could be traveling from all the way from Eldoret, bringing his sick mother to Nairobi and be curtailed by the demonstrations. Now, you are infringing the right of another person. So the Article 37 it has been operationalized by the Public Order Act, which brings the limitations of these demonstrations. So when we look at, and it's not bad to demonstrate, looking at the concern of the Azimio coalition, they have every right to demonstrate. And you will find out that most Kenyans a good part of Kenyans are supporting the demonstrations because they have valid reasons. You can say they have valid reasons But now we look at it and say, at whose expense are we carrying out these demonstrations? Are there other ways that we can find these things to be dealt with? So are these people who are demonstrations, are they using the right structures? Are they informing the police? Like I found out that the OCS is supposed to be notified 3 days before, and not more than 14 days before. It should be between 6:30 and 6:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. They're supposed to notify on the routes used. They're supposed to notify how many people are coming. Are these people who are organizing these demonstrations structured? And it was Makore Wilson. I don't know if it was Kiptanui who said that that we are okay socially. I do not think even the people are we are not socially right, because the demonstrators who go to demonstrate, most of them take advantage of these demonstrations. They want to cause mayhem. We start demonstrations by barricading roads. We start demonstrations by throwing roads. Looking at our culture and our ethics, there's always been a rivalry between the police and the people. So this gives a chance of that to enhance the rivalry. The police is against the people are against the police. So it's really up to the environment that we are in is not really good for the demonstrations. And the government of course has to come in and enforce the law, like give the use of police who are supposed to be well trained to handle demonstrations. So are these police well trained to handle these people? Do they have enough training? Do they know how to handle crowds? What is the minimum force they're using? So the government should come in and give police enough training, and at the same time, it should not infringe the rights of demonstrators, but there should be more discipline and structure with the demonstrators. Coming to the part of the government, narrowing down to individuals. There should be, demonstrations are not the only way that we should go. I feel at this point, we should not go to this point where we are at over something that can be discussed, over something that can use other methods of conflict resolution.
Thank you, Esther, for that insight around what is happening currently in the country, the demonstrations that we are seeing, the running battles here and there between the police and the public. And I would like to bring Koge still on the same issues around the demonstrations. There's been questions around whether the demonstrations are purely political or whether they are issue-based. There's been questions around whether the real cause of this demonstration, and as Esther had mentioned earlier, there's so much that is hidden under the carpet that we don't know. Is this demonstration really issue-based, or is it just another political debate that is just coming in the scope of a demonstration on the high cost of living?
Thank you very much, Elvis. First off is to say that we must obviously underline the fact that politics is a game of interests. And wherever politicians find that they can make use of the electoral constituency to attain their personal interests, of course, the easiest way is for them to curate the personal interests to look like national interests. And in one way or the other, that is something that can be clearly seen, even in these demonstrations, be it with how the police are handling demonstrators and with how the demonstrators are also handling the police. Something to note, since the opposition called on their followers and on Kenyans to join them on the streets, is the fact that the laws governing demonstrations and picketing in Kenya have not been fully understood by both sides. Or rather, maybe both sides understand, but they choose to neglect. Because you look at these demonstrations, demonstrators are behaving like it is the demonstrations of the 90s and the 80s, whereas the police are also behaving like they are handling the demonstrations of 90s and 80s. It looks like it is a legacy being passed down from one generation to another. of course, Article 37 gives people the right to demonstrate. And as Makore Wilson had mentioned, that the article clearly said peaceably and unarmed. And you'll also understand that Section 5 of the Public Order Act, which buttresses this article, gives some guidelines on how these demonstrations should be held. And sometimes I tend to give an example of the demonstrations that were held on Sabasaba, that's on 7th of June, on the 7th of July in South Africa, led by the EFF leader. I don't know if some have not interacted with that clip, maybe people can look at a clip of how those demonstrations were. And you would realize that those people were organized. They knew what they were doing. They only sang within the roads. There was no touching of anyone's property. And the police did not even attack them. Look at Section 61 of the National Police Service Act, which tells the police of how these leaders or how the police should handle demonstrators. And you'll see that the section clearly says that the police should, first of all, finish all the nonviolent means in handling protesters. But also, the section goes ahead to say that the level of force applied on the demonstrators should be perpendicular to the level of behavior of the demonstrators. You look at this thing, also you look at Article 24 of the Constitution, which limits these laws. And it clearly says that your right to demonstrate ends at my right. Where my right begins is where your right ends. So looking at all these dynamics, you'll find that we really have an uphill task of, first of all, ensuring that people understand what we are demonstrating against. Because you look at these demonstrations, it is only the leaders who understand what the demonstration is about. But the demonstrators clearly do not really understand what it is about. A majority of them, because of course, even if a demonstration is being held at the most peaceful place in this country, there must be 2 or 3 people who must take advantage of it. But then, what are we doing with that? Thank you.
Thank you, Koge. Thank you for that broader perspective of and highlighting, of course, the different constitutional provisions that are there to protect demonstrations, and of course the role that the police should do. And the other panelist, Wafula Koko, has joined us, and Wafula, we were just discussing around the issue around the anti-government demonstrations that we are having, and the issue about the legality and the constitutionality of the same have arisen over the current few days. And people have, I don't know if we could say the Article 37 is being misunderstood. To what extent would you say, as an advocate, people should go in as far as such demonstrations are concerned? And as we even respond to that, we've seen arrests in the past few days. People have been charged in courts of law more than 48 hours later, as is envisioned in the Constitution. What is happening? What is really happening? What is the implication of this on our laws and on our current state of the nation? Wafula, if you can hear me, you can kindly go ahead.
Thank you so much, Elvis, for allowing me to join. Though late, I apologize. I just came in when you were discussing the aspect of Article 37, and I just want to point again to that discussion that where we are as a country, and our constitution from 2010 up to now, there seemed to be limited understanding of what we intended to do with the Constitution across from the duty bearers, especially, who seem to be misinterpreting Article 37. The parameters of picketing or demonstrating are provided under Article 37. And the aspect of the police involvement under Article 37 is to ensure that there is order and to even provide security to the people demonstrating. Now, there's aspect of people who join demonstration and probably cause violence. We already have security, we already have organs that are mandated to deal with that. And we see people, for instance, being arrested and charged in court that they've done something wrong. But we cannot now demonize the whole of Article 37 because of a few elements that interrupt, for instance, probably demonstrations. I also just want to quickly address the aspect of the ongoing, what we've been calling Azimio demonstrations. Of course, we appreciate that probably the conversation is being led by the Azimio leadership, but we should not forget that we even have CSOs that are participating in these conversations, so that we should not limit it to the aspect of it being a political leaders conversation, but generally there are Kenyans also who want their voice heard. It is only that probably the media is speaking out, the leadership of Azimio, who seem to be moving forward this conversation. In terms of the arrests and even probably detention and even late arraignment in court, this is reminiscent of what happened before the 2010 constitution, reminiscent of the Kanu regime. So that this is something we have to call out because, I mean, our constitution is not a cosmetic document. It is supposed to be adhered to both by the duty bearers and the right holders. And probably, I think it is time for us to reimagine and rethink what freedom means. And most of the time, Elvis and maybe and probably other participants will agree with me that especially when people are in power, they forget that you will still need the same provisions of the law to protect you when you're not in power. So I think I'd want to leave it at that. And of course, we have seen IPOA come out, say they are going to investigate. We've seen organizations like Muhuri come out and say we need to have data on the people who have been violated during these demonstrations. I'd want to leave it at that for now.
Oh, thank you. And for bringing out IPOA, I know very well that besides IPOA, there are other entities, including civil society, that have also come out to condemn the acts of the police. But again, there are different quarters that say that the civil society and other players and other independent institutions are just sanitizing the rogue conduct of the public that we are seeing at the moment. Some people say the civil society has come out to defend that kind of behavior that is not really civil. So Ruth Bolo, do you agree with these statements? Because of course, there are those who are condemning, but there are those who believe that the civil society is sanitizing very bad conduct among the public and is encouraging a very bad culture that might not be very sustainable and very useful for the country going forward.
Elvis, thank you. Allow me to answer that and then quickly respond to some of the sentiments that was going on about the demonstrations and percent security. Number one, civil society has actually today done a press briefing to actually demand for answers on the police brutality issue that's been going on. So civil society is not quiet. They've actually been speaking up about it. And to see the press briefing that they have done today, it's very encouraging because the civil society is very key in oversighting government. And so for them to come out and speak up and say, we are demanding answers as to why there is police brutality that is ongoing, as to why children are going through this, as to why this is happening, it's very encouraging. Now, I would like each of us to do a simple exercise after we are done with this Zoom. Look for a 10-year-old and ask the 10-year-old, what do you do when you see a police officer? What is the first thing that comes to your mind? And to all our surprises, it will not be anything positive at first. When you're in school, in the syllabus, you're taught that the police officer is a law enforcement officer. They're supposed to protect you. If anything wrong is happening, you're supposed to go to them. But right now, with the perception, with everything that's been going on social media, with everything that they're seeing on the streets, with everything that they're seeing on the media, when you see a police officer, you panic. You don't know whether they want to get a bribe from you. You don't know whether or not you're going to be falsely accused for something. You don't know whether or not they are going to mistake you for someone in exasperation, which unfortunately is the wrong perception because they are other police officers who are actually going out of their way to conduct business as per the Constitution. Now, on to the issue of protests. When you already have this perception of a police officer and you're going to demonstrate, you're not just going to sit back. You're already going at a point where you need to defend yourself because you have a perception that this person is going to come at me. Okay? And I'd like us to draw our attention back to when the former Prime Minister was, was being sworn in by Miguna as the people's president. What happened? There was no violence because the police officers did not do a thing. They are armed, okay? So their reaction then dictates the reaction of the protesters. The police officers, as per the Constitution, are supposed to protect lives and property. So why aren't you protecting property? Why are you instead provoking the lives of people? So really, when we are talking about the protesters, it is the tone of the police officers that then sets the tone of the protesters. And I will tell you, as someone who has engaged in protests before, when you are in a political protest, because we've seen children protesting for their land, we've seen nurses protesting, we've seen, even the famous teachers union protesting, and they did not at one point witness the same force that is witnessed when they're a political protest. When you are in a political protest and the police officers do not do anything, that protest is as boring as ever can be. You will not last the whole day. So the tone of the police officers is what sets it. And we are in a country where people are very comfortable to break the law simply because the executive is breaking the law by not following the orders from the judiciary. Leaders are breaking the law, speaking the way they want, and even on incitement, violence incitement, and nothing is happening to them. Law enforcement officers, or our policemen, are also breaking the law. So as a citizen, I am seeing all these people at powerful positions breaking the law. So what motivation is there really for me to also follow the law? It becomes very difficult because then you can argue there is a law that then demanded the former president to break the National Assembly as per the advice of the Chief Justice. Did that happen? No. So why is it that as Ruth Bolo, why should I follow what the judiciary is telling me to do? Why should I follow what the judge is telling me? A Kenyan citizen can argue that. So it becomes very difficult to do this. But in all these things, there is no amount, there is nothing that will justify killing. There is nothing that will justify. And my issue is that as Kenyans, as Kenyans, we are very quick to punish those who are suicidal. But we are not quick to protect the lives of our people. And this is not just in protest. Let's talk about our girls who are, stuck in the Arab countries. If it was another nation, they'll be very quick in getting them. But when it comes to us, we are not quick in protecting our lives. That is why we can shoot to kill, we can throw canisters in houses, because we are not very keen on protecting the lives of our people. So the tone of our police officers is what sets the tone of the protest. And the truth be told, in all these protests that are going on, I strongly believe that if this protest were protests by the teachers union or the nurses or the doctors or whatnot, they would not witness the same pressure that they are witnessing. So in these protests that are there, it is not uncommon, even in the example Kogei gave of South Africa, to find goons or thieves using this opportunity to then conduct their business of the day, because they have seen a gap, they have seen an opportunity, and in a situation where there is chaos in a country, they thrive in chaos. So they will definitely do that. But I don't think that all Kenyans or 100% of protesters should suffer because of mistakes of the hooligans. Those police officers should not be busy shooting us and throwing canisters. They should be protecting those properties from being vandalized.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Ruth. And now as we move towards the conclusion of this subject area, Habiba, the government has always given assurance to the citizens of their security, even during the ongoing demonstration. But still, we've seen so many people shying away from going about their businesses. We could see, for example, in Nairobi, a lot of businesses were shut the past 2 days or so. And even despite the assurance by the government that we are protected, what is the biggest fear? What is the biggest fear of the people? Is it just merely the demonstrations, or there's something beyond just the demonstrations that people normally are afraid of that we are not told?
I think at this point, it is safe to say that the demonstrations have had a severe not severe per se, but it has a huge impact on the socioeconomic state of the country. I would also like to differ in opinion when saying that we have grown socially. We haven't grown socially. In fact, the demonstrations are really causing us to grow further apart. I think the socially may be online, but in person, everybody is trying to get away because you're not sure if the person who is walking right next to you in this demonstration is about to break into your shop or break into the business that you have. I really feel like the government still with there are two distinct there's a distinct line between saying and doing. If the government assures you by word of mouth that they're going to protect you, and then on the streets, on the media, you see how the police are exerting a lot of force on demonstrators and everyone, I think seeing is believing. They would rather now show us that they are capable of protecting the citizens so that we are able to go into our businesses and carry on our daily lives regardless of the protest. I share a lot of sentiments that Ruth Bolo has shared with us today. The debate on whether or not to have demonstration is really, it's a debate now, because some people feel like it's illegal because the demonstrators have ended up blocking roads. Wame disrupt traffic, and you can remember the situation of what happened to the expressway, and others feel as though that it is legal because we are exercising our free speech, our right to picket. But then as Koge had mentioned, your right stops where my right begins, and the moment you infringe on that, then there is no, you've broken the law at that point. So with that regard, I'd like to bring a different perspective to all this, because in my opinion, I really feel like whether it would be doctors or nurses holding protests, it is different from what we are seeing now. And in my own personal opinion, at the beginning of this Mandamano, the initial intention that really came out strongly was on electoral. I'm going to put it, okay, it was on the election outcome. But then as time went by and they realized that nobody is listening to them because of this, then they decided to hook other aspects that would bring more Kenyans on board, because if you now start saying elections, then you've broken the country into half. We have now the UDA and the Azmio. So now they need more people to push this agenda. And now I feel like they're roping in the aspect of high cost of living, corruption onto this basket. But then at the back of my mind, I really feel like these protests initially were to address the issue of elections, but then they're using high cost of living to sugarcoat all this. In the middle of Mandamano, we saw this guy who went without a shirt and a kid, and they were carrying this banner, and there was no police attacking them. So we also need to understand that police are also responsible for what is happening in the country, specifically in Nairobi, Mombasa, and all these other areas that have had high what is this called? High insecurity cases. So the government has responded with a mixture of like force and dialogue, and the opposition still feels like the dialogue was not met with much, in quotes, respect, because of the people they brought to have these dialogues with, and thus they returned to the street until the government brings forth more agreeable. I'm not sure what they inured by that, but then they brought that into that perspective. So this whole demonstration issue has brought about the main issue with Kenyans right now is the atmosphere of insecurity that is with us. And if that continues, we can no longer, we can't go to our businesses, we can't go to schools, we cannot go out there to get our means of livelihood. So in my opinion, this issue of security now, okay, I'll end up, not spewing rather, but
so what way out? What way out, Habiba? What way out of this situation? I think that would be the biggest question, and that one will come to every panelist here. What is the way out? What do we suggest as young people? What do we propose should be done? Maybe in just 30 seconds.
I think the government is using the police here. So I feel like now the government should sit down with the opposition leaders and try to find a middle way. The only way out of this is through dialogue, and one party must compromise. One out of these sides must compromise so that we can be able to get into, we have that nexus and we have that agreement so that Kenyans' life can no longer be lost. Our children are safe in school, and we can all go about our businesses as usual. Yeah.
Thank you. And Makore, let me bring you on this as well. You had begun this conversation already, and you had brought out the issue about dialogue maybe as a way out of this situation. But is that the only way? Is dialogue working, and is that the only way we can do to get out of this situation, or there's any other proposal that you have to get us out of this situation?
Thank you, Elvis, for bringing me on board again. I did mention about dialogue, but you see, when you talk about dialogue, there are some other things that need to be included in that process of engaging dialogue. Because you may talk about dialogue, like what happened, which brought about the handshake, which happened 9th of March 2018. There is the problem that are facing the people. There is high cost of living, and there is also the political interest, but there is some sections of the political practitioners or those people engaged in politics are pushing for. But now trying to use the problems that people are facing as if they're advancing the people's interest, but in reality, they're pushing for their own interest. So when I look at the dialogue, because dialogue has always worked in so many ways, we engage in that, but the dialogue I'm looking at is a dialogue that is going to talk about how to make the lives of the citizens of Kenya better, but not to talk about how to share power. Because when you look at the Election Act number 24, 2011, it's very clear on how an election is conducted in the country and how the outcomes of the election are supposed to be treated, and how to know who is the winner and who is the loser. So when we come to such kind of situations, then we can talk about a dialogue that is after advancing the interests of specific players within the political space. So that is how I look at it. Because when, maybe I can go further and talk about what is provided under the Bill of Rights. That's chapter 4, specifically part 2 on rights and fundamental freedoms. There's the right to life. There is also the right to freedom of expression. Yes, the people are expressing themselves, but are they expressing themselves in a better way? And do they have the information as to why they're demonstrating as provided for under Article 35 on access to information, as well as under the Access to Information Act number 6 of 2016? So the leadership, that is the executive and also the opposition, need to inform their supporters on exactly why they should go against the demonstration and why they should engage in demonstration, so that at least they have information on why they're engaging in such kind of activities. By so doing, then I believe our negotiation should be structured on ideas that are best informed or best structured to respond to the societal needs at the moment through policy interventions, maybe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that contribution. And Koge, what way out of this situation, the current stalemate that we are in a few seconds?
Thank you very much, Elvis. Personally, I think to heal this stalemate needs us to interrogate the root cause of this thing. Because as long as the internal fabric of police recruitment is fitness in terms of physicality more than fitness in terms of reasoning, then there's nothing much we'll be doing. Because with this generation that is keen on laws, a generation that is well aware, then it is very hard to make them keep silent while police brutality is ongoing. Secondly, if the main fabric of demonstrators is on my person and my tribe more than issues, then we can really sing the whole day and dance the whole day, but there's nothing much to heal. I think I would really recommend that there is really need to train or to teach the people about the values, like the values of the national values of Kenya, which are in Article 10 of the Constitution, and how those are the fabric of a country. Because if we go on like this, chest thumping and trying to see who is stronger at the end of the day, There is a very famous quote that says, when fahali wawili wakipigana, ni nyasi ndio inaumia. So the citizenry will continue to suffer as the powers that be continues to enjoy in white sandy beaches.
Thank you. Thank you, Kogi, for that. I think interrogating the root causes and, of course, training and civic education around values. Esther, what would be your thought about the way out of this current stalemate? Because this is not sustainable anymore.
The way out, I will start by saying that the government and the opposition both play a role in this stalemate. No one is clean. It is not the Kenya Kwanza team that is, it is not Kenya Kwanza that is clean. It is not Azimio that is clean. Each of them have a contribution to this. And the Kriegler report that had recommendations on electoral reforms, just to quote something, it said that let us end the elections with finality. But now the stalemate is brought because this stalemate it is brought because of elections, and it is always brought because of elections. We're always in this stalemate because of elections. So how are we going to go about it? Can't this other side follow the recommendations that were given, that let's end the elections with finality? Okay, you want to follow Article 37 of the Constitution to give you your right to picket, but you do not want to follow the part that says that respects the court decisions after the Supreme Court's ruling. The Supreme Court ruled that there's a legitimate government, but you keep on calling it illegitimate. So part of these demonstrations are honestly caused by the pain of losing elections. When Azimio are going to demonstrate on the streets, it is not entirely about there is still the pain of losing the elections, of wanting to be in power, and then you miss out the opportunity. And then looking at the Kenya Kwanza team, also led by the Honorable President William Ruto, he also should find a way in which he's going to handle his opposition leader that got almost up. There was a very narrow margin between the president who was elected and his runners up. So he has to find a magnanimous way in when there was the demonstrations that were supposed to happen on a certain Monday, and he gave out his speech and quoted Winston Churchill and said that this is not the time to be right or wrong, but this is the time to sit down and know where the problem is. So when he did that, and there was the recommendations for the bipartisan talks, that one was not the final. It was not supposed to be a final thing, because when you're talking about mediation and arbitration, it is continuous. It is not something you say once and stop it there. So when we look at him out here, he's still chest thumping. He's still saying, police, you did a good job. When people were killed, when innocent children are being tear gassed, and he's saying you did a good job. His team itself is out here saying we will deal with you. Even the cabinet for trade said that someone will die. You know, such statements, and nothing is done to these people. So they add the firewood to the fire. That's why I'm saying both of them are responsible. So what the president should do, as we say, calm down the high horses. Calm down, be the bigger brother, because he's already in power. You cannot be driving a car and looking back to see who is with me or who is not with me. He's the president of this country, and he has the responsibility to maintain peace and security. It's one of his responsibilities. He's a symbol of national unity. So he should calm down his high horses and meet the opposition leader, know how to handle your opposition, because this is also politics. And don't forget that in politics, these are the challenges you'll have to face. So if he keeps on reacting to everything that the opposition is doing, no, you need to be mature enough, be mature enough and calm down and meet them. Just say, the answer here is dialogue and conflict resolution, which may not happen in one day, but let it be a continuous process, because he needs to be the bigger brother here. He's the president here. And it is not about power sharing or a handshake. It is about, I am the president, but now let us discuss what is the way forward for the country.
Thank you. Ruth, do you agree? Because I know that even as late as yesterday, we saw the opposition leader, Raila Odinga, saying that he does not want to speak to the government, he does not want to speak to Ruto, but the government must do what it has to do to bring down certain things, the bare minimums that the opposition has given. So is this the way? Do you think this will work? The president coming down, speaking to the opposition leader, is that the only way we can sort out this element?
Elvis, you know, there is the ideal bit of it, and there is the reality. If I was a political leader and I was in the president's situation, it would be very difficult to yield to 100% of what opposition is asking for, simply because then I will be a weak president. And I am just less than a year into, or rather, we can even say a year into it. However, he also needs to, you know, it gets to a point as a leader where you have to think of the bigger picture and put the country first as opposed to yourself. We are in a new financial year without a finance bill, which is quite a very difficult position to be in. As an employer, you ask yourself, so am I supposed to begin to implement that finance bill? You're caught in between. But also, one of the items that opposition had asked for at the very beginning was the office of the opposition. And one thing I will give to the current president's regime is the will or the appearance to be willing to listen to Kenyans. Whether or not they actually listen is a whole different thing. But just the appearance that they actually want to listen to Kenyans is one thing I will applaud him for. So if that is the case, and he is very genuine in listening to people, then there is I don't see a reason why he cannot give them the office of the opposition. This also just helps to sort of calm down the wars that are there in between, because then they are able to oversight him within a structured manner. Because as it is, this winner takes it all system is one of the biggest problems, not just in Kenya, but the whole of Africa. If you look at the elders retreat that was taking place this week, their theme was towards a strong democracy movement in Africa. And the worry was that in a number of these countries, in the past couple of months, we've been seeing protests in almost every single part of this country. In East Africa, we have protests. In South Africa, we have protests. In West Africa, we have protests. So which means clearly there is an issue in how our democratic systems are structured. And there's there needs to be a conversation to change it. But we are where we are at. And this conversation needs to happen. Like for us, Kenya, we still have another 4 years or so before we now get to decide, as we are moving into this election, what needs to happen, what needs to change. So at this point, one, the police needs to apply the law. They need to stop creating their own imaginations of how they should protect yourself, because this other person has got a stone, I've got a bullet. You really in no amount can measure the two. So the police need to apply the law. And when I talk of apply the law, it means they need to do as per the constitution, that is protect the property and the lives. Two, they also need to know, if I am arresting this person, even if they decide because we also need to be honest and realistic that a number of them are actually under threat of orders from above, whoever above may be. And so if I, as a police officer, am told either you do you go ahead and arrest Elvis or you lose your job, I need to realize that in the long run, I may actually end up in a situation whereby I am alone and I have to answer as to why I have arrested Elvis for more than 24 hours without charging him. So they need to be able to understand what is in the constitution that pertains their job. And two, we also need to calm down and have a conversation at the county level. Nairobi has been hit the hardest with this protest, but I have not had our governor speak. I have not had him say anything. I have not had him condemn police brutality. I have not had him condemn what happened at the expressway. So this begs the question, what is the executive at the county level doing when they are unable to govern their counties and they are quiet about it? We've seen very few of them actually come out to say, so as a county, this is our stand. This is what we are going to do about it. County assemblies need to also come out and speak up and say, now we do not have a finance bill. However, we have certain issues within our mandates that we feel are able to fill in the gaps that have been raised. Issues of inter-county trade is a conversation we need to start having. issue of double taxation within the county is a conversation we need to start having. If we cannot rely on national government, we cannot rely on National Assembly, then we need to now be able to rely on county assembly. Otherwise, why are they existing? So I feel like this is a conversation that we now need to disseminate downwards, and even as the national government and opposition figure out the way forward. But whatever happens, we all need to remember that one of them will have to fall either way. There's no two way about it.
Thank you, Ruth, for that. And that brings us into even our next level of conversation around the alternative governments that we have. We understand that in Kenya, we have the executive, the judiciary, and parliament, which are supposed to be independent arms altogether and supposed to function separately. And Wafula, I would like to bring you on this to just understand whether our other arms of government have lived up to the expectations, or is it that the executive arm was given too much powers by the constitution? Because even as recently as the other day, we've seen some court orders being disregarded by the executive. We've seen parliament go against the will of the people, even in the finance bill that was recently passed. And this was just merely because we have a majority of the government side in parliament, which then ensure that everything was passed with minimal adjustments that were made by the public. So is it that the executive was given too much powers, or where is the weak link? Wafula?
Thank you so much once again, Elvis. Of course, when we talk about the constitutional law, we remember the aspect of separation of powers by Montesquieu, which our constitution provides for in terms of the powers between the executive, parliament, and judiciary, that each has their own role. But what we face as a country, we have a rule of law problem. We have amazing laws, but the implementation is a problem. So that today you will say that people need to, for instance, adhere to XYZ because you are not in that position at that time. And when you are sent to that position, you forget. So we have a rule of law problem. We have organs created under the Constitution to perform certain functions. The question becomes, are these organs performing those functions? Parliament has a role to represent the people. But we've seen, reports across board produced by CSOs, where CSOs have documented that members of parliament have failed to represent the people. Now, the aspect of the right to recall in the Constitution, have we attempted to use the right of recall in terms of holding our parliamentarians accountable? You recall that when parliamentarians, I think in the run-up to the 2017 election, when they amended the Elections Act and tried to create provisions under the Elections Act to make it so impossible to recall them. So we have structures, yes, but in terms of implementing the same has been a problem. And maybe instead of just us lamenting, probably what we need to remember is, when we talk about an election, for instance, when people vote someone in, whether it's the president, whether it's an MCA, it does not mean that you've given these fellows, you've not given their vote so that they have the free way to make decisions for you all through the 5 years without consulting you. That is why we say, sovereignty belongs to the people. So that if we are talking about negotiating and ensuring that how are we being represented as a people, and we do not feel or we do not think that we are not being represented properly, then what avenues can we use? I mean, I'm just thinking out aloud, how come so far no one has used the right of recall provisions under the Constitution? I do not think that our Constitution has allocated the executive too much power. I just think that the people we have elected to parliament have forgotten their roles. And I mean, the question I've been asking across board is, Elvis, how far can institutions like the IBC protect Kenyans from themselves? If you elect me, Elvis, and I don't even meet the aspects of Chapter 6, do you expect me to change after I've gone to parliament? then the next aspect becomes, are the people who end up on the ballot papers, for instance, the people who are able to be on the ballot papers, the people who are able to campaign and use lots of money, they cannot, of course, compete at the same level with the people with, with lesser financial muscle. So is it also possible for us to blame Kenyans for the leaders they elect, and yet the people who end up on the ballot papers most of the time are those with the financial muscle? I may be a very good person. I may have moral and ethical standards that are in the constitution, but maybe I don't have the financial muscle to campaign like other people. This brings me to the next aspect, the Election Campaigning Financing Act of 2013, which has never been implemented. And we see a situation, if it's implemented and we control the use of money in politics, could we see a situation whereby even the people with lesser financial muscle are able to participate in the electoral processes? I want to leave it at that, Elvis.
Thank you for bringing out. I think the right to recall is one of the most underused rights that is there in the Constitution, and not so many people have explored that. I don't know whether this would is it due to lack of information, or is it that it's too difficult? What do you think, Esther?
What's your question again?
I'm just asking, Fula has just brought out that there's a right to recall members of parliament, or even the president, whenever we feel that they are not doing as we expect. Then where is the problem? Is it that there's a lack of education to the public and even to the population about these same rights that they have? Or is it because the structures that have been put in place to make sure that this happens are so difficult that people normally are afraid to explore this route?
I think the right to recall in Kenya is something that has not caught enough most people don't know about it. And if you start looking at it as a right, you start going to the question of what is the process. Maybe it's something that is going to take a longer time. It's something that is going to take a lot of procedure. So people don't really know how to go about it. And just looking at for case scenario about, for example, I just realized how easy it is not even to impeach a governor or a senator. Looking at cases like the governor for Meru and the deputy governor for Siaya County. You saw he was, they brought the cases, they say this is the evidence, this and this and this, but there's much technicality to that process that even when you start thinking about recalling your MCA or your MP, I'm not so sure about the strength of it coming to actualization. Because, for example, if you the governor case and the senator and the deputy governor case, I saw it is like they were being protected so much, and then also it turned out to be of course again a fraction between this fraction of government and this fraction of government. This team is standing with this team, and this team is also standing with this team. So also looking at the independence of the parliament, independence of the parliament as an institution, I would say that when it now comes to the real politics, where the government of the day is now in place, it has to achieve its agenda. And it's very hard it's quite impossible for the executive, the president, the leader of the executive, who is the president, to implement his government agenda using he has to have the majority of the parliament to implement his agenda. So coming to the real politics, I think they'll have to do what it has to be done to implement the government agenda, because they need to budget, they need to pass laws. And now it comes to a case of it is our time, so let it just be our time. And looking case in, for example, Joe Biden had to get into bipartisan talks because the Republicans, to pass his infrastructure bill, pass the bill to raise on the debt ceiling. Obama, when he was in power, he spent most of his time trying to convince the Republicans to pass the Obamacare and his gun policies. So I feel like when it gets to that, what needs to be done for the executive to be able to implement its agenda through the legislature.
Thank you, Esther. And Makore, maybe on this one, Parliament has been perceived as a supremacy battleground in the recent past and even in years back, where we see those pro-government against anti-government people coming on board, not necessarily maybe sometimes discussing issues, but just because we are on this side, we have to do what it takes. Just like Esther said, we have to do what it takes to ensure that the agenda of government goes through. What can be done different to ensure that Parliament regains its independence and is supposed to and it lives up to the expectations that the Constitution envisions it and as the people envision Parliament to be?
Thank you, Elvis, for that question. I believe for us to have an independent legislature, for example, which is inclusive of the Senate and also the National Assembly, we as the citizens also need to take responsibility over taking our legislature. The people elect to Parliament, we need to check on them, because you have mentioned about the right to recall as provided for under Article 104 of the Constitution of Kenya. But remember, the same Article 104, Part 2, subsection 2, gives also the same legislature an avenue of making or enacting legislation to provide for the grounds on which a member must be recalled. So that means that a number of times you have observed that our member of parliament comes up with policies that are there to protect them. So the reason I say that we as the citizen needs to be very strong on how to push the agendas that represent the views of the people. We need always to be the one overseeing our legislature. Because when you look at, for example, at Article 91 and 92, which talks about the basic requirement for political parties and regulation of political parties, you realize the reason as why we have supremacy patterns as regards to the oppositions and also those in the government is because we are serving the political clientele. That's what we can call it in politics. That I'm serving this person because I'm aligned with this person. We basically, we remember that we don't have a specific political ideology in our political parties. So, for example, these political parties are individualistic. Somebody owns a party. So that if you have to be in a particular political party, then it means you have to subscribe to the ideals or the belief system of that leader of that political party. So I think the best thing that we can do, if it will be allowed to work, is that let these members of parliament, for example, that is something that I've been thinking, but I know that it may take time to be actioned. If the top leadership can come up, or political parties can come up with a policy that ensures that, for example, a party leader serves for 2 years, that means that person cannot serve for 5 years. Because these 5 years of having a party leader staying in power in a political party for long, that means that person makes that political party a personal entity. So he behaves as he is in political entrepreneurship. So that this is where I make my money. And I have also to ensure that everybody who stays in this party must subscribe to what I believe in. Look, for example, when we talk about, for example, the opposition, when some section of the opposition leaders went to see the president, you saw what was happening in the opposition party. They were saying these people have to answer. There's some letters, notice that were sent to them that they have to respond as to why they did not ask for permission from the political leaders to be able to have that chance of speaking with the president. The question comes, when you are elected as the leader, you are representing the views of the people, not the political party. But the way our political parties have been structured, a leader who's elected by the people is representing a party, but not the people. So it's high time we as citizens come up strong to make the leaders we elect to pursue the interests of the people, but not the party interest or the individual political party leaders' interest. Because we cannot talk about the party interest, because parties, as provided under Section 91 and 92 of the Constitution of Kenya, as well as provided for under the Political Parties Act number 11 of 2011, is very clear on how political parties should be run. And when we resolve such kind of issues, then we will not have a lot of supremacy battles within parliament. But we have a structured way in which our leaders respond to the needs of the people, knowing that we are here to serve the people, but not parties or political party leaders. I think that is something we need to work. So citizens need to take full responsibility of expressing their views and taking the leaders accountable on any issues that respond to the needs of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Makore. And on this again, I think you brought out a perspective of citizens taking the responsibility of calling out their leaders and telling them what the expectation is. But Koge, this has been quite a challenge, and I know that Parliament is, and you've seen this even in the just concluded general elections. We've seen some members of Parliament shift their allegiance from their parties that elected them into office into the government, the party that is sponsored by the government of the day. Is this that our political structures or our laws are not very convenient for people to move around from party to party, or is it just a right? Do we just allow people to move from one party to another the way they want, or there should be laws that should limit this movement so that the opposition side can also be strengthened? Because this has been a question that the government is trying to weaken the opposition by taking most of the members from the opposition side. We saw Jubilee, now a fraction of it is now working with the government. We saw some leaders from ODM now working with government. Do we allow this freedom of movement, or do we just have laws that clearly stipulate where you stay up until the next election period?
Thank you very much, Elvis. I want to categorically say that there are laws that limit interaction of political members within political parties and the interactions with other political parties. And I know the Political Parties Act stipulates clearly that a member elected on one political party cannot push the agenda of another party. But in his work of 1945, Hans Morgenthau, in his work, The Evil of Politics and the Ethics of Evil, argues that politics is not a function of ethics. Because were it a function of ethics, then it could mean that God is always on the side of those who have deep pockets, those who have the greatest battalions, and the party that wins elections. And the same could be spoken of Satan being on the other side. But in reality, politics does not work with ethics as it should. And as it is in every law in Kenya, what is the enforceability? What is the enforceability of these laws? Even the recall section of the Constitution, what are the enforceability mechanisms? How will it be enforced? You see, the problem with our laws and our Constitution is that it is very hard to enforce these laws. Look at, for example, when political parties, when the Constitution says clearly that Parliament is independent of the executive and the judiciary, so is the judiciary and the executive independent of Parliament. But then the Political Parties Act and Political Parties Code of Conduct also says that a member of a political party must profess the agenda of the party. When the leader of the political party, for instance, UDA, is the president, who is the leader of executive, but then you are told that the members of UDA, who are members of parliament, should be independent from the executive. There's a lot of contradiction in the Constitution that these people sail with. It is clear for them to sail with them, because they would say the parliament is independent, but now this is the position of UDA. The position of UDA is to pass the Finance Act, which in this case is also the position of the executive. So in one way or the other, you'll find that our laws are contradictory to each other. No, until we find a way that we have a clearly stipulated, and that points me to the institutional challenges that we have as a country. We have a lot of institutional challenges, and a majority of them lie in the policy space, and others lie in the fact that our institutions are overstretched and sometimes under-resourced. For instance, the judiciary, if even asked to interpret that law, you know how overstretched that case could take, because clearly we have a presidential system with a president who, although the Constitution theoretically says he has equal powers with the other arms of government, you'll realize that this presidential system gives the president almost total powers over and above the other arms of government.
Thank you, Koge. And in this point of our institutions, I know there are quite a number of institutions that could be brought on board when we're discussing about this topic. You've pointed out the judiciary, Wakoko had mentioned earlier on IBC, we have ORPP. Ruth, do you think the problem is the capacity for these independent institutions, or where is the problem and how can it be sorted so that we have independent bodies doing exactly what they are envisioned to do?
Before I come to your question, allow me to point to two things that had been said by the previous speakers. One is on the right to recall. And I think it should sink into each and every one of us that you cannot revolutionize a hungry person. For so long as I am hungry, I can always be bought. For so long as I need, 50 shillings to go and buy a meal, to go and get myself a meal, when it is time to recall my member of parliament, and my member of parliament gives me that amount, not to give a copy of my ID, not to put a signature, best believe I'm going to do it. So that is one of the challenges that we have to accept. And that is why there's one of the very many panelists in one of the media sessions who said, most of the people protesting are people who have nothing to lose. That at the end of the year in December, they will put their clothes in one bag and their chair, and they will go up country, and they will come in March or April when they get something to do. So we need to even realize that some of the gaps is not in the constitution per se, because we have one of the best constitutions in the continent that is always being uploaded, that is always being used for benchmarking, that is always being used for referrals. But our biggest issue is one, on implementation, and two, on character. And some of these things you cannot legislate character. So even when we're talking about our independent institutions, which I will come to, the second issue I wanted to point out on is political party. And that, I agree with Koge, that is a whole circus of confusion, simply because it's not that our political parties don't have ideologies, they have. I'll tell you, for example, we've got political parties that are liberal, and they align to international bodies that are liberal. We have political parties that are conservative, and they align to international bodies that are conservative. How you will know is you look at their laws, you look at their language, look at how they carry themselves, and look at their parliamentarians, because you will realize that these parliamentarians will even post on social media and see. So the liberal movements of Africa, political parties of Africa have met to discuss ABCD. Conservative parties have met under this body to discuss. So they are there. It's just that one, they are not followed per se, and two, people don't. We are still unable to relate what is in their manifesto with what they say. And I'll give an example. A political party that is against LGBTQIA+ community is most likely a conservative party. And that one that is pushing for it is more likely a liberal party. So it's very easy to tell, but Kenyans are still yet to understand the ideology. Now, as a politician, Elvis, you want to vie in Nairobi, in Embakasi, for example, and you realize that in Embakasi, ABC party is the strongest. Even if you don't align to that ideology, you will move to ABC party because you want to get that. So it's a whole circle of confusion because you're not sure whether or not you want to align to that ideology. And that is why when they get that party ticket and they get into assembly, county assembly or national assembly or senate or whatever it is, they move because their heart was not in that ideology in the first place. Now, when we come to our independent institutions, they are independent institutions by name, but they are not exactly independent institutions. And we have seen this with different regimes over and over again. So this is a habit that is being carried forward, and this is a habit that is being, pushed, handed down to each and every election cycle, each and every generation. Yes, we've got the judiciary. Yes, we've got IEBC, we've got ORPP. We've also got civil society that plays a really, really big role. And each and every time there is a discussion of a certain bill, we see civil society go to give their views. Whether or not these views are incorporated is a whole different discussion. But we see civil society going forward to give their views and saying this is what needs to happen. It's also very difficult, like I think it was Koge who said, or it was you, Elvis, who said that if I am in a political party that is in government and my leader is the president, so then how do I oversight the leader of my party unless I don't want the ticket of that party? It becomes very, very difficult. So the independence of this institution is very questionable too, also because of how they are recruited. If Esther recruits me into EACC, for example, as a political favor, how am I going to oversight Esther? Well, my job literally is, the fate of my job lies with her. It becomes very difficult. So we also need to look at the recruitment gaps that are in a number of these institutions. But I don't think that each and everything can be legislated. We've got one of the best constitutions. It's just about time we start to implement this constitution. That is where we are failing as a country. It's in the bit of implementing this constitution. And of course, in the bit of oversighting the various actors in this independent constitution. I think that's where the issue really is.
Thank you, Ruth, on that. And then I just want to pick on from where you mentioned about the issue of political parties and whether we have ideology-based political parties or we have individual-based political parties. Habiba Abdi, could you just help us understand? Do you think we are at a point where we have an ideology-based political parties, or are politics still very individual-based?
In my opinion, I really feel like overall politics is usually a matter of strategy. It's usually a matter of interest. So when somebody is vying for a political seat or is putting themselves out there in a political position, they are mainly out there for their own interest. And this is clearly seen like with political parties as well. I would not want to beat around the bush or sugarcoat. I represent the Youth League within a larger political party group. And one thing, as we were trying to come up with this Youth League, was to establish a constitution and ideologies that we were supposed to identify with as the youth of these political parties. But then you find that even as we are doing these things, it is very hard to find the people behind that certain political party. It is very difficult to identify. So for example, when we say UDA, you look at UDA, you do not see the people behind that political party. You see President Ruto. The same thing with Azimio. You do not see the people behind Azimio. You see Raila. And this is also a very huge issue, because now, if these are the same people who are in these political parties for all this time, then the youth are also not getting that exposure to be able to also be part and be seen as part of all these, of the entire institution of a political party. Also, as I had said, political parties are put in place as a matter of strategy. And you find that a lot of political parties are struggling with financial issues. So you find that political parties now, after the election has been done, you now find political parties now trying to align with government or with sources that they can find money with. So you find that they contradict the rules and the provisions that are given within its institution, because according to the Political Parties Act, there are a lot of provisions given for them in there, but then it is always contradicted, because they want that economic power, that upper hand when it comes to finances and stuff like that. So you find that this becomes very disruptive, and it's causing a lot of instability within political parties. So one of the things maybe I would recommend for political parties to do is to stick with their constitution and their ideologies. This is the only way to become strong as a political party. Also to empower the youth that are within that political party, so that they are also seen as part of political parties, because youth have, let's not lie, youth have the energy, they have the sight, the stamina, they can push agendas out there and to their peers, and it's really going to be empowering for them. I believe political parties it can be a platform to empower even youth, and we are not seeing much of that right now. But I believe as we continue more conversations like this, we can continue to push youth to become faces of parties, not just one person or a certain group of people, or those kind of things. So I would suggest that.
Thank you, Habiba. And Makore, do you agree, and do you think we can get out of this individual kind of politics that Habiba has clearly mentioned, that when you look at political parties, when you look at UDA, for example, the first contact person you will see is the president. When you look at ODM, for example, the first contact you see is Raila Odinga before the ideologies of the party. Is it possible to move out of this kind of politics into more ideology-based politics? And if yes, how can we get to that point?
Thank you, Elvis, for that question. I had made a suggestion before that we have good laws, good policy in this country, but the operationalization of those policies and laws in this country is a problem at the moment. That is a big challenge we're suffering as a country. So moving away from individual-based political parties will take us years. That is something that we must agree, because that's how we have been structured. We are seeing political parties as individualistic or entities for aggrandizing political entrepreneurship in the country. You know, when I was studying political science, we could define some political characters as political entrepreneurs, that you are in politics because you want to make profits out of it, not truly to serve the interests of the people, but to also grow yourself as an individual. This, before I respond critically to your question, you know, when you look at how IEBC is giving out statistics on how much people went to spend in political campaigns, then you ask yourself one question. Where do these people get this money to campaign? If you say that, for example, in Nairobi, you spend 80 million to win an election as an MP, and one person have had an access to members of parliament salaries, you realize that the money they are earning is not enough to repay them the spending for political campaigns. So this brings the issue of we are aligning to a particular individual, because if this person wins, we'll be in a government where can be able to accrue more money through engaging in tender so that they can be able to repay back what we spent. So it may take us a long period of time, or maybe years, for us to be able to move from individual-based political parties to issue-based political parties. So this one now, I'll talk about we, the citizens, we, the people who give these political party leaders or the political players a chance to be able to be where they are as regards to the practice of politics. So we as the citizen need to be out there, understand our rights as provided for in our constitution of Kenya, and also be able to be well versed with the Political Parties Act so that we can find a win which you can hold our leaders accountable to every endeavor they make that regards to the fairness and also that regards to how they should be able to serve as a citizen. So my conclusion is we may take years, but we can be able to do that. And my suggestion will be, if there is a way that a citizen can push that within the formation of political parties, we provide a clause that says a party leader should be able to serve, for example, for only 2 years, then get out of the position, then another person takes over. Because what we have at now, you find that, for example, when we talk of ODM, Raila has been a member of ODM since the ODM was founded. So it means he owns the party. And everybody who's in ODM must sing Raila's name. When we had the URP and the Jubilee, they were all, Jubilee was under, I mean, when we had TNA, the National Alliance, that one was under the former President Uhuru Kenyatta. The URP was under the current president, His Excellency William Samoei Ruto. So if you are associated with those parties, you must sing that person's name, because they own the party. So if we can have a structure within the formation of political parties, even, you know, when we are reviewing the Political Parties Act, I remember back then in 2022, if I'm not wrong, there's some section which were reviewed, and I thought maybe they could bring up an aspect whereby at least we can have such changes that a political party leader should serve for this period of time. Then after that, allows another person to take over. So through that change in political party leadership, at least can have a win which a party is owned by the members of the party, but not owned by the individual. That is what I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Makore, for that. Koge, do you agree that the term limits for party leaders is the way to go, so that, because the sustainability of these parties has also been a question. When you look at URP, after the now president moved to Jubilee, then URP was forgotten. Jubilee now has been ruling the government for the last 10 years, but it's now at the verge of collapsing. For sustainability, do you think this proposal by Makore Wilson is the way to go, or you have another recommendation to ensure that we have sustainable political parties that are able to stand the test of time?
Thank you, Elvis. I think I'd agree with Makore Wilson on that, but I'd also ask the very predominant question. That is, what is the fabric of these political parties? Which is something we've been discussing since you asked this question. If the fabric of this of UDA is William Ruto, then when William Ruto ceases to be a party leader, then we forget about UDA. I think the fundamental question would be, what is the fabric behind these parties? You look at the longest serving political parties even in Africa, parties that include our very own KANU, looking at parties including ANC in South Africa, CCM in Tanzania. You look at ANC and CCM, for instance, in Tanzania and South Africa, and you look at it is the party code of conduct, the party ideology, what the party stands for has been what has stood the test of time. But you come to Kenya and you look at our political parties and you realize that the sustainability of our political parties is an uphill task. It is an uphill task for just one reason: the fact that we glorify individuals more than the issues that these parties stand for. And I loved it when you asked the question of how long would, let's say, for instance, I think the other underlying question also is the finances in the party. Who's financing the party? Look at Jubilee, for instance. Why is Jubilee shaking? It is shaking after the exit of Uhuru Kenyatta from power. It is not shaking because Uhuru Kenyatta is no longer the party leader. It started shaking immediately Uhuru Kenyatta left power. So that means that the financial sustainability of these parties is majorly dependent on membership who are politicians in power. So if UDS stands to have a majority of members for the next like 20 years, then trust me, UDA will stand the test of time. But and UDA having a majority of members clearly depends on who the party leader is. Because a UDA of a party leader of the caliber of William Ruto and a UDA of a party leader of the caliber of Kiptanui Kogei would not be the same magnitude of a party, because the Kenyan electoral system, and I remember when I started this conversation, even about the police, I said there are a lot of things that are legacies from the colonial times and the immediately post-independence time that have been handed over generation to generation. Issues of political party ownership, issues of individualist political parties, issues of having national values and code of conduct only on paper, but not in the mantra of the people. I believe that going forward, political parties need to define what they stand for. Once we know what they stand for, is how now we'll have to align with these political parties. But going as we are, then it is a tall task.
Thank you, Kogei. Esther, how do we move into a situation of having sustainable political parties? Of course, there have been claims that political parties in Kenya are again very regional. When you look at the kind of representation that we get even in elected leaders, you find as a particular region of the country has predominantly leaders from a particular political parties as opposed to the other. How do we then break this and ensure that we have parties that are more reaching in terms of the scope that they cover in the country and are more sustainable beyond what we have now?
Thank you, Wambura. First of all, I would like to take us back a little bit to the point I was talking about, how technical it is to recall a member of parliament or any person in the legislature. I'd just like to note it that I just found out that, do you know what it takes to recall a legislature? They say that you who are recalling need to deposit 500,000 shillings to the IEBC. Are you ready to do that? You deposit 500,000 shillings to the IEBC, and then you need to get 30% of registered voters to sign the petition, and then take it to High Court, wait for a ruling, take all that time to do all that. So that's why I was saying it is quite technical. It's a technical process to get into the recalling procedure. And then to your question about sustainability of political parties, to be very brutally honest, I will say that is something. If we are talking about our country, Kenya, we will see it after maybe 100 years. We will be old grandfathers and grandmothers. And that is the time, maybe, we're not even sure if we'll see it. Maybe we'll see that political parties are now ideologically driven and not politically driven. Because at the moment, it is very true to say that political parties are are political bases. Political parties are very functional when it's an election period or it's a campaign period. But ask yourself, when the campaigns are over, what does a political party do? For instance, the UDA party right now is recruiting, is on grassroots recruitment for preparation of 2027 elections. So as we are at now, political parties are politically driven. Their motive is driving the political agenda. The Communist Party of China has been way in place since time immemorial, and until now, it drives the ideology of the communist ideology in China. But here in Kenya, we have something about what drives our politics mostly is ethnicity. So ethnicity comes to fall and affect and draws the formation of political parties. That's why we have party ethnicity. So most political parties, even if it's a national party, it has the strength of particular tribes before it gets into the smaller tribes. So if we have not even yet tackled the question of ethnicity in Kenya, then how are we going now to tackle the question of getting political parties that are going to be ideologically driven? Now, with ethnicity, if the party are party ethnic driven, brings lack of inclusivity. It brings an equal distribution of resources in the country, and an equal distribution of resources leads to class division. Now, even as I said, we have not solved the problem of ethnicity. Right now, we already have a class problem in Kenya. So the vision of having a party that's ideological driven party, to me, is chasing a wild goose in the wind. And as someone said, party funding, I read somewhere that we should get to a place that the public should fund political parties. And I thought that's a radical idea, but think about it. If the public can fund political parties, then no one has more stakes in that party than other parties. I was talking to Senator Okiya Omutata. He has formed his own party, and he opened up that just to open a political party in Kenya is very expensive. But now he has started forming his own party. But how many of us know such a party? As Habiba said, when we look at ODM, we see Raila Odinga. When we look at UDA, we see William Ruto. There is no institutionalization of these parties. And that is where the problem is. If we can get to a point where we institutionalize the party is about the agenda more than the individual. And then we also look at setting the clear time limits for the parties. Once it's an institution, then we can have clear guidelines on how to go about this party, so that the party doesn't belong to so and so, but it's an institution with its set rules, with its clear time limits, an institution that even provides leadership development that can groom potential successors, can foster mentorship programs for people who can take over, so that when it comes to succession, there is no rivalry. And as we are speaking right now, that dream is still far-fetched from me in Kenya. So at the moment, I think we just have to continue with what we have right now, and maybe hope for the best as time comes.
Thank you. Esther. We are really pressed of time, and I would like us to wind up this conversation in a few, but I also recognize that we have other participants who joined us in this call and have been with us throughout, and therefore I would just want to give one person, Joseph Owino, to make a comment. He's been raising his hand. Then I'll read a few comments in the chat box, and then I'll give the panelists a chance to give a final word as we wind up this conversation. So Joseph, kindly come on board in a minute.
Thank you so much, Joseph Owino, and I'm glad to join this discussion, although today I'm a persona non grata. And I really want to echo two statements. One is that which Ms. Esther Nyonje has raised on issues of political party funding. There's an amount, a certain percentage that comes from the exchequer that is directed to the political parties fund, like that, which is distributed to the political parties. And going to as we neared the 2022 elections, there was some amendment that was done in terms of political parties funding, that it was now based that even the smaller parties could get some bit of funding to although there are also a bit of party membership that brings funding to the parties. But now the question that we should ask ourselves is that not about the public funding the parties, but rather whatever these parties get, are we even seeing a CSR project that these parties are doing to the community to uplift the the needs of the community? Have we seen any resource center or any other thing that is beneficial to the citizens that we can say that these parties, apart from just driving our political agenda, what have they done to uplift the issues about humanity as as per the ideologies? Then secondly, I come from the disability line, and so I know we've seen political parties lining up, forming disability leagues into essence of promoting disability inclusion within these political parties. But you get that the issue that comes forth is that these disability leagues are formed just to tick the boxes as per the regulations that are set out by the political party, by the register of the political parties, and even the IBC. But we find that the voices of these persons with disabilities are not entrenched whenever their issues are to be taken care of. Especially one key issue is about their nomination to different assemblies, be it the county assemblies, national assembly, and even the Senate. Because you find, for example, the only person with disability you can find in this NEC or the National Executive Committee of these political parties is the person who heads the disability league. You'll never see any other PWD leading a section of the party, be it an SG, be it the chairman of the party, or any other senior position within the next of this party. And this plays a role, especially whenever it is negotiated about the slots for these PWDs, then you find that they are left out. It is other people who decide for them, but not their voices being taken care of whenever these appointments or nominations are to be done. So this brings us to the call that the voices of persons with abilities should be entrenched. The voices of persons with abilities should be entrenched in these political parties, not just in having them conjoined together in a disability league, but rather having roles. Taking leadership roles, main leadership roles within these political parties. Like you saw, UDA had a woman SG up to to the last election. ODM had the youthful SG. Why are we not having a PW SG or PW chairman, in the taking leadership of these political parties, so that we build that inclusive setup all round, from youth, women, PWD, so that at least all these cadres are taken care of within the leadership and the management of these political parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for that contribution. And now I just want to read a few comments here in the chat box. One, Evans Kiuna would beg to differ with Mr. Koge on the law of being contradictory. Montesquieu's principle of separation of powers didn't foresee a situation where the arms are extremely independent, but rather to be independent but work collaboratively. See executive collecting money, then sharing with the two other arms. The judiciary defines laws passed in Bunge and executive executes. So what I think happened is Bunge doesn't know just how powerful it is in the country as the people's representatives. Bunge could have stopped this finance bill before it got to judiciary. They could also define interests and what they want to do with the country and shape the budget and where the money should be spent. I agree and see the situation where they are obliged to help the leaders achieve his agenda, but they have what it takes within the reach and mandate to pace that agenda. Kevin Wahanya says, how I wish we, the youth of Kenya, would not inherit the bad habits of our political fathers. How I wish we'd not be as selfish, but as objective as possible. I wish we'd see citizens just as, we'd not see citizens just as mere fodder, ladder, stepping stones, etc., but respect them as humans being worthy of having better environments to thrive. Ramadan Juma, we can't do away with ethnicity and tribalism in African politics. It's always a tool of capitalization. That is why political parties will remain regional and tribalistic. Article 37 of Kenyan Constitution provides for the right to demonstrate unarmed. The police mandate is only to protect property and safeguard the protesters. I think I'll stop there, but I think there's been a good conversation happening at the chat box. I've seen quite a number of participants contributing to these conversations, and I want to really thank them. And I've seen some panelists also responding to some of these conversations that are happening online. At this level now, I just want to give every panelist who has been with us in this call a chance to give their final remarks in a minute as we move towards the tail end of this conversation from one of the areas or any of the areas of discussions that we've had. Maybe just a minute to give your final thoughts and final remarks or recommendations. So I'll start with you, Esther.
Thank you, Elvis. I would like to say that another point about political parties is that we have dominance of major political parties, that it's very difficult for upcoming small parties to be noticed and take dominance. So my point.
Akore, if you could kindly mute. Okay, proceed, Esther.
Now, my point of view, sadly, is on a very pessimistic angle, because the politics of Kenya has always played itself in a repeating manner time and time again, that I feel that it's going to take for us a very long time for us to get to a point where we say we are democratically mature and able to have a civilized government and a civilized citizenry. Now, looking at someone like, I feel like it's starting with Senator Okiya Mutata, and that is one person starting it, but now he has so many fights to fight, just one man fighting so many battles with a system. But well, to be hopeful about it, we can say that let's give it time, and we will get to see the country we want. If we ourselves, as one of the viewers has said, that let us not inherit the traditions, let us not inherit the beliefs and the political behavior of our predecessors. Let us create a new political culture to be able to steer us forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Esther, and thank you for that final thought. Kiptanui Kogei.
Thank you, Elvis, and thank you to the participants who've joined us today. Mine will be 3 points. First of all is there is need to really strengthen the independence of constitutional institutions. This can only be done by ensuring that they are straightly laid out ways of appointments, which are appointments by merit. Because you look at the weaknesses of our institutions are on and around the appointing authority. If the president is the appointing authority, of course, he has leverage on constitutional office holders. But if the appointments are through merit and not political expediency, then I think we would really move ahead in terms of separation of powers. Secondly is to strengthen the enforcement of, especially the enforcement capacity of the judiciary. Our judiciary clearly does not have an enforcement capacity. It has enforcement capacity when it wants to, but it is not a ready enforcement capacity. You look at the executive would ignore court orders at whim, wherever they want, and nothing will happen. For instance, even recently, EPRA had increased taxes on fuel, even after the Finance Act 2023 had been suspended by the High Court. And that shows that the enforcement capacity of our judiciary is really wanting. I look forward to a situation where the judiciary will have an opportunity even to subject those people who have contempt to even sanctions and to deny them some privileges and rights. And also lastly, Elvis, is we need to move away from making laws with people in mind. One thing that has affected our rule of law is making laws with people in mind. I make a law with Ruth Bolo in mind, thinking that this law will not hurt me at one point in time. If our bunge, if our parliamentarians would make laws rationally without having their opponents in mind, then we will have very progressive supporting legislations to the Constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Koge, for those 3 powerful recommendations. And now I'll bring on board Habiba. Our final thoughts in a minute.
Thank you so much. This has been a really fruitful discussion, and I believe conversation like this need to continue. So for my closing remarks, I'd just like to highlight just a few of the key areas that we have focused on. And in my opinion, I really feel like are okay so long as everyone is upholding the rule of law, everyone is adhering to human rights, police is doing what they're expected to do to protect and safeguard the protesters and safeguard public property and property belonging to the citizens of Kenya. And also the people picketing need to learn of picketing etiquette. So now that's done. Moving forward is I suggest that we need to strengthen the independence of parliamentary committees, because this goes in a long way to also protect the independence of individual MPs, so that even when it comes time, it's now time to vote on certain things within the country, they do so out of their own consciousness and not because they have received threats, as what the president did the other time with regards to the finance bill. So strengthening the independence of the parliamentary committee, I really feel like it's going to go a long way in that. And my last would be to empower the youth of Kenya. Absolutely empowering them helps them to avoid being used as expendable cannon fodder during this protest and this mandamano nini. It avoids them being used, and it also gives them a platform to be able to move forward and give them that watafute kitu ya siku, and ni hii kitu ya kutafuta that economic that sapa, hiyo sapa tu ndo inafanya these people are on the street. So if you allow them to have the opportunity to empower themselves and give themselves that lunch, then we won't see as much of crime or all that crime being committed during this whole process. So other than that, I really don't have much to say other than that. So thank you so much, and thank you to all panelists. I have learned so much from all of you. Thank you, Elvis.
Thank you, Habiba. Now it's your chance, Ruth Bolo.
Thank you so much, Elvis. There are a couple of things I was really itching to respond to during the conversation, but first, my closing remarks, just in case my minute elapses before. I think one is to acknowledge that the cost of living is actually high. Very, very high. And it's not that Kenyans are refusing to pay taxes, hence the reason why this is being used emotionally, but it is the fact that we cannot afford it. And the taxes should be able to work for me. I should be able to access certain services even as I pay those taxes. Not that I'm paying those taxes and I still have to look for a private developer or a private service provider to give me the same service I should be getting from government at an extremely high cost. And Kenyans are still recovering from the finance bill drama, and the opposition is taking advantage of it. And unfortunately, government is not doing anything to it, but is instead reacting to opposition. So we have a government that is reacting and not acting, and we have an opposition that is using the emotional vulnerability of Kenyans to then irk government. And so I think we need to come to have a national dialogue on how best we could address these grievances. Two, on the issue on political parties, it's not just in Kenya. If you look at FBC in Uganda, they're currently having issues in their political parties, between the internal wars of BCJ and POA. So these are issues that are there, and it's not just Kenya that is struggling to, straighten their political parties. And like I said, we still have a long way to go for us to get to a point where we are saying this political party is about the ideologies of the party and the manifesto of the party and what it stands for vis-a-vis the individual of the party. And I think that's why I really agree to what someone said about putting a term limit for political party leaders or political party chairman. But even if you put those limits there, again, our issue and our problem still goes back to implementation. We've got a very good Election Finance Act, but I can tell you it is not implemented. You're told, so this is, you should not, the IBC will regulate and say you should not pass 30 million for Member of Parliament, for example, but how are you going to know whether or not I spend above or below that? It's very difficult to know, it's very difficult to account. On the issue of the public funding parties, I think, Elvis, it's very difficult for the public to fund parties, whereas right now where we are at as a country, it is the candidates that are funding those electorates. When you go and listen to them, they will tell you, Mheshimiwa, we love you. Mheshimiwa, I love what you're saying. I will vote for you, but you need to give me something before you leave for me to listen to you. It's very difficult to expect that same person to then fund the party. However, unlike in 2017, where only 2 political parties were being funded, right now, at least most political parties have got, are receiving something from the political parties fund. It is not enough to run the party, but it is something at least for them to be able to move a few things here and there. But we need to see results. Now, in 2017, you were crying that only 2 political parties are being given the funds. Now, all of you are getting the funds, of course, as per the different caps that had been put. We need to see results. You asked for something, you got it, so we need to see results. And this notion that parties are being funded by membership, I will tell you for free, Elvis, they only get money from membership when it is almost election time. Because during the electoral period, when we are nearing the nominations, then I will go and recruit Kogei, I will recruit Habib, I will recruit Esther, and I will actually pay for them because I need them to vote for me at the party primary. So that is not even the membership paying, it is still the candidates paying. And that is why if as a candidate, I have paid all this money to then be able to buy from your party, how then are you going to tell me not to talk to who I want? Because I use the money. I am actually paying for that ticket. You understand? So it's very difficult to do that. And finally, on the issue of the special interest group, which Joseph raised, and he was talking about the persons with disability. Again, looking at the comparison between 2017 and 2022. In 2017, I know political parties that had to look for people in their houses and beg them, please come and buy. We are not going to charge you. We're not going to do anything. We know you've got, some sort of control in your community. You've got some sort of voice. Come and buy with our party. What that does is that, one, that is not a person who willingly wants to buy. I'm only doing it because as a party, if I am seen not to have any person with disability, youth or woman that is buying with my party, then there is an issue. So we actually don't have people who are driven for this. We end up just ticking the boxes, as he was saying, when it comes to the leagues. But not everything, as I say, is able to be legislated. Some of these things have got to do with character, and we need to change our characters as individuals. Thank you so much for this conversation. And finally, I think we also need to maximize on the various platforms that are there. I know CMD has the People's Dialogue Festival that happens every year, and that is one informal platform for conversations where I have actually seen the public be able to objectively criticize and oversight various leaders without asking for a handout. So I think we need to have more similar conversations where we are able to have this dialogue, but now post the dialogue, are we able to actually implement some of the commitments and put to task some of the commitments and some of the solutions that are given during this forum?
Thank you, Ruth, for your contribution. Now, Makore, it's your time.
Thank you, Elvis, and my fellow panelists for that engaging discourse that is talking about the issues pertaining our country. I'm truly grateful for all of you for your contribution. So my parting shot will be, I believe our focus as a country should be on poverty alleviation, especially amongst the young people, the whole citizen, all inclusive. And we need to be guided by the Ubuntu philosophy that says, I am because you are, and you are because I am. So in this way, we need to work on inclusive economic development, whereby even the leadership and the citizens, we all recognize them. If we have to grow as a country, then all of us must be brought on board so that we grow in a way that is all inclusive and respond to the needs of all the citizens of the country, though it may be a challenge. And also on the part of separation of power, I believe it is our responsibility as a citizen of this country to hold our leaders accountable. Because when you look at the country, most people in the political space treat citizens as voting robots. So that once you vote, I forget about you and they go focus on growing myself. financially, and the other parameters of growth. So there is something that Joseph talked about on the budget that comes from the National Treasury, the Exchequer. I happen to have interacted with the Political Parties Act separately, and there is about 0.3% of the national budget that goes to political parties, which we have the Political Parties Fund, which is established under it's about Section 23 of the Political Parties Act number 11 of 2011. And they also under Section 24, which gives details about sources of money for the Political Parties Fund. So when you look at 3% of the national budget going to Political Parties Fund, it means we as citizens are contributors to that political party fund. So we need also to ensure that the usage of that money is in a process that it can be able to be accounted for. So we need to hold our leaders accountable, even through the political parties office itself, that we know this money has been allocated to this political party, and we follow our citizens to know how the money is going to be, because that is our money. It's the money that comes from our taxes. So we need to be very active as citizens and take our civil responsibility to ensure that we hold our leaders accountable. I think by so doing, we'll be able to realize most of the things that we discussed today in this discourse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Makore, and thank you very much to all the panelists for your insightful contributions in this conversation of the state of the nation. I know this is a conversation that could take us the whole day to discuss, but apparently because we are limited of time, we have to end this conversation there. But I want to be to say thank you so much to all of you who have found time to spare and to contribute to this conversation, and also extend this thank you message to all those others who have joined us in this call. We had over 35 participants joining in the call, others following online on YouTube and on Facebook through the CMD platforms. We really do not take this for granted. And on behalf of CMD, we really want to appreciate that all this has been able to happen because you found time to have this conversation. And I also want to thank CMD Kenya in particular for providing this space for us to discuss and delve into the issues of the state of the nation, and also extend great appreciation to the partners, including Uraia Trust and the Royal Danish Embassy, who have made this possible by providing support to this kind of conversation. At that end, I would like to now release all of you to leave at your own pleasure. And it has been a good moment chatting with you. I've been your host, Elvis Wambura. Until next time, bye-bye.